in a row, and we appreciate you being here. Our guest tonight is Lanhee Chen, and I want to give you just a little bit of background on him and on the office that he's running for. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. As the chief fiscal officer, the state controller has independent authority and is responsible for accountability and disbursement of the state's financial resources. The controller safeguards many types of property until it's claimed by the rightful owners. They independently audit any government agencies that spend state funds, and they administer the payroll system for state government employees and California State University employees. Controllers serve on many different boards and commissions with authorities ranging from state public land management to crime victim compensation. The controller is a member of numerous financing authorities and fiscal and financial oversight entities, including the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization. The controller also serves on the boards of the nation's 2 largest public pension funds, and they are one of 8 statewide constitutional officials who are elected every 4 years in California. Lanhee Chen, as I said, is our Republican candidate for state controller. And you should know that many people in the top echelons of the California Republican Party believe that of all of our candidates, especially at the state executive level, Lanhee has the very best chance of winning that seat. Lanhee was raised in Southern California and is the son of immigrants from Taiwan. After earning 4 degrees from Harvard University, he served in senior roles in both Republican and Democratic presidential administrations. Today, Lanhee is regarded as one of America's leading policy commentators and experts. He teaches at Stanford University, where he also conducts research at the Hoover Institute. He has helped leaders in California and around the country develop policies to address some of our society's most pressing problems, like improving our healthcare system, saving Social Security, and growing our economy. His ideas have appeared in America's biggest newspapers and on news programs around the world. Previously, Lanhee was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate to serve as a member of the Independent and Bipartisan Social Security Advisory Board. Mr. Chen is married and the father of 2 children. He's also a small businessman. He is currently the chair of the board of directors of El Camino Health, a healthcare system in his community. I'd like to welcome Lanhee Chen. And I just want to say to those of you listening, please, if you have any questions for him, put your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Welcome, Lanhee.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Great to be with all of you today and to have an opportunity to share with you a couple of updates about my campaign for state controller, but also more broadly to talk about the opportunity that I think we have coming in November. And, you know, a lot of people start by asking what the state controller does, why it's an office they ought to care about. Gretchen gave a very nice introduction and an update in terms of what it is the controller's office does. But I want to move to a more basic point, which is I think in California, one of the biggest challenges we have is a lack of accountability into how our state spends our tax dollars. We have a state that spends about $300 billion in tax dollars every single year. And it's the only state in the country where we don't have complete line-by-line transparency over every single dollar that we spend. To put that in some perspective, every other state around the country, even Illinois, where I like to say there are former governors sitting in prison, even in Illinois, they have a level of transparency we do not have in California. And so the state controller is the person who is really fundamentally responsible for ensuring that we have that kind of transparency over our state's finances. But more importantly than that, the state controller is responsible for ensuring that we have accountability for that money. So not only do we need to know where it's going, we ought to know how well it's being used. And one of the challenges we have in our state is that there are so many examples of fiscal mismanagement, of waste, of outright corruption. And these are the kinds of things the state controller is in a position to address. Let me give you a couple of examples, some of which might be familiar to you. During the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the state of California began issuing unemployment insurance checks pretty much to anybody who applied through a program called the Employment Development Department, or EDD. Many of you will be familiar with this scandal, where the state sent $20 billion of your money to fraudsters, 800 million of it to people in prison, money to Russian mobsters and gangsters across the ocean. The money went to some criminal enterprises in China. We even think some of it may have gone to help terrorist organizations in Iran. All of that money was sent out the door during a period of time when nobody was really minding the store. And unfortunately, the problem is not only was that money sent out the door, and by the way, that's $20 billion we're likely not getting back, but a bunch of different changes were proposed to improve the system so that this malfeasance would never happen again. And as you might imagine, even though we kind of know how to solve the problem, nobody in Sacramento has accepted responsibility for actually solving. In fact, the state auditor put forward 8 specific recommendations for policy changes that would ensure that this never happened again. And of those 8, only 2 of them have even been touched by the legislature. The others have been completely ignored by the legislature, by this governor. And so what we need is an independent voice, a watchdog, if you will, in Sacramento to make sure that these challenges are addressed. And that's one of the things, just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kind of accountability that we need to have over our state finances. Let me give you another example, the gas tax. All of you understand Californians pay some of the highest gas taxes in the country. And there is no accountability for where any of that gas tax money goes. We're told, of course, that the money goes to improve roads, it goes to construct infrastructure. Last time I looked, we don't have the best roads in the country. We certainly don't have the best infrastructure in the country. And so one of the challenges we have is a lack of real accountability around where this money is going from the gas tax and frankly, from many of our other sources of taxation and revenue in the state. So the controller can have the ability to really move the needle forward in terms of saying, can we figure out where this money is going, what it's being used for, and more importantly, I'd like to find out how efficiently the money is being spent. You know, one of the things as controller I'd love to do is to give every single program of state government a letter grade so that we know exactly how efficiently and how well that money is being spent. The controller has the ability to audit any state spending as well as any spending at the local level that uses state money. So it's a tremendously important platform, tremendously important because we can finally get to the bottom of where a lot of this money is actually being spent. Let me raise one other thing that the controller can do that I think is very, very important, which is the controller can be a voice for fiscal responsibility and for financial sanity in Sacramento. As Gretchen noted, the controller sits on almost 80 different boards and commissions. And some of those boards and commissions are very important. For example, the Franchise Tax Board, which oversees the tax system in our state. The boards of the 2 big pension programs, which are massively underfunded. We have trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities, but these pension funds aren't being honest with us as taxpayers about how much we're going to owe down the line. So to be CEO of the fiscal condition of the state means not just understanding where the money is going, but sitting on these very, very important boards and commissions that really govern a number of different extremely important issues in California. So the position of controller is important, not only because of the different kinds of responsibilities the job has, but frankly, we need someone who's going to go to Sacramento and be able to hold all of these other office holders accountable. The controller is completely independent. He or she reports to you, the people, not to the governor, not to the lieutenant governor, not to anybody else. And so that independent platform can be hugely important in terms of surfacing and raising and helping people understand why these issues are important and why it is we need to bring fiscal sanity back to the state. And, you know, I believe that I have a background that's pretty unique in terms of bringing a skill set that will actually help us to improve the fiscal state of our state. I have spent my career at the intersection of public policy and teaching and business. And I bring an experience that comes from all of these different areas. I haven't been a career politician. I'm an outsider that's looking to come into Sacramento and bring the experience I have in all of these different fields to try and improve the situation we face when it comes to our fiscal state of affairs in Sacramento. I've had the opportunity to live in California for a large part of my life. I grew up in California, in the Southern California, in the LA area at a time when it was great to be here. My parents came to California after having immigrated to the US from Taiwan in the 1970s. I was born in North Carolina, actually spent the first 6 years of my life there. My parents figured out two things pretty quickly about North Carolina. One is it's very far from Taiwan. And the second is that the Chinese food is not very good. So that's actually why we moved to Southern California. But we had the opportunity to grow up. I had the opportunity to grow up, my brother and I, in a state at a time when it was great to be in California. And many of you remember and understand what I'm saying. We were once a state where people came to build their families and build their businesses and trying to create opportunity for people around them. And that was the California I grew up in. I had the good fortune to go to my local public high school to see really the diversity of California firsthand. And then went back to Harvard and spent quite a bit of time there getting 4 degrees. And I like to say that I lived to tell the story of how one can go to Harvard and come out a conservative, because that's really what my story is. And then had the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. With a number of policymakers, many of whom are Republicans, many of whom have really been instrumental in trying to create jobs and create opportunity and solve big problems. And then I moved back to California about 9 years ago with my wife, and we now have 2 kids and live in the Bay Area. And I'll tell you, the California that we came back to was nothing like the California I grew up in. The opportunities that we saw when I was growing up, the different kinds of businesses that were created and jobs that were created, that wasn't the California that we came back to. Unfortunately, as I like to say now, too many people come to California to leave. And that is the California we face. And I diagnose our challenges really as an inability to solve big problems, an inability to manage our finances in a responsible way, and a lack of transparency between people who run this state and those of us really who are their bosses, the voters. And so that's really the core of why I believe so much in California, why I believe so much that we need to change the course of this state. And I'm gratified that a number of people, a number of experts, if you believe them, but also a number of people I talk to believe that we've got the best shot of any statewide candidate to win in California in 2022. Let me give you a couple reasons why I think that is. Number one, we've managed to gain the support of people, really not just Republicans, but Democrats and independents who are fed up with how this state is doing business as well. I was the only Republican in about 10 years to get the endorsement of the Los Angeles Times. And I know that in some places that's probably not a good thing, but I do believe that actually it's an important piece of understanding that when Democrats and independents look at the statewide ballot and they look at somebody and they say, hey, this guy's been endorsed by the LA Times. Now, why was I endorsed by the LA Times? They made the argument that the controller needs to be as independent from the party in power as possible. And I completely agree with them. If you want a watchdog, not a lapdog in Sacramento, then you need to have somebody who has some distance from the party that's actually running everything else. And so that was the reason why the Times endorsed me. By the way, they weren't the only ones. I've received endorsements from 16 newspapers across our state. The San Jose Mercury News in Northern California, the Orange County Register, the LA Daily News, the Bakersfield Californian, the San Diego Union Tribune. All of these newspapers believe, as I do, that you need a controller who has the right experience, the right background, but more importantly, has the independence to do the job well. So that's number one. I think we've got support from a broad range of different constituencies across our state. Number two, look at our performance in the primary. I was the only Republican, actually only the second Republican in the last 10 years to win a statewide election in California. We won in June with 37% of the vote. The Democrats did divide up the vote a little bit, but we managed to win an election for only the second time during this top 2 era. And my margin of victory over my nearest Democratic opponent was 15 points. So we were able to do well in a time when people have said, look, Republicans can't win statewide. I just disagree with that, because I think that we have the ability to communicate a strong message. And the evidence, the proof is in the pudding in terms of how well we did in June. I think part of the reason we did well, number 3, is because our campaign is really speaking to constituencies we need to speak to in order to win in California. We've been very robust in our activity in Hispanic communities. We've been very robust in reaching out to Asian American communities. I think it's very, very important that we focus on these growing communities in our state and how we communicate with them about the value of having fiscal discipline in Sacramento. I think that's another reason why we've managed to be successful. And I tell you, I'm very confident that we're going to be able to compete and win in the November election. So let me spend the last few minutes of my time here talking to you about why I think we can win in November. It's a tough task. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. All of you understand this. Republicans are only 24% of statewide registration. To win this election, we're going to have to go out and win a lot of independents, and yes, even some Democrats. But I believe the foundation we've laid is a very important piece of that. Let me also say, I think we have built the strongest statewide infrastructure for a non-gubernatorial campaign in recent history. I've managed to raise $3.5 million already for this campaign. It's a record amount for this office. We're going to raise even more as we go forward, because we need that to compete against the Democrats, to compete against the labor unions, to compete against the various forces that want the status quo. We're going to need that amount of money in order to be successful. And so we've raised a lot of money. We plan on having a robust effort where we communicate digital media, radio, television, mail. We're going to be all across the state when the time is right. And so building an infrastructure, building a team that's ready to succeed, I feel great about where we're positioned as we go into this November election. Let me share with all of you some private polling information. And, you know, I mean, my team is always like, don't share this, but I'm so excited. I want all of you to know, because I think it's really important that all of you understand this. We have a real shot at winning. Why do we have a real shot at winning? We have a real shot at winning because the electorate, first of all, doesn't know a lot about the controller's office, but second of all, don't know anything about my opponent or about me. We're both relatively unknown to people across this state. And, you know, it's really different. If you're trying to run against somebody like Gavin Newsom, who everybody knows and everybody's got an opinion of, if you're running against somebody like that, it's really hard sometimes to move the needle because people have an opinion. They think they know the person, whatever. When you've got a race where nobody knows either of us really well, you have the opportunity to define the race. You have the opponent. You have the ability to define your opponent, to define the kind of campaign that we're going to run. And I'll just tell you this: my opponent is somebody who comes from the San Francisco School of Democratic Politics. She started her career as a community organizer for Gavin Newsom, and she's never left that environment. She, for her whole career, has been part of this San Francisco team with Kamala Harris and with Nancy Pelosi and with Gavin Newsom. And she's gone from being a supervisor of San Francisco County, one of the most progressive places in our state, to serving now on the Board of Equalization. And the things that we know about her personal and her professional background, these are things that I believe Californians are not going to want. Somebody who has got a career, unfortunately, of walking away from personal and professional responsibilities. Somebody who, as recently as about 15 years ago, decided that she wanted to study socialism in Venezuela under Hugo Chavez. This is the kind of person that I'm running against. This is a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. And, you know, it's one thing to be liberal. It's one thing to be from San Francisco. It's quite another to have policies that are outside of the mainstream of the people of the state of California. So part of the reason why I believe we have the ability to be successful here is because of the contrast that I'm going to draw against my opponent. I'm someone who has a demonstrated record of success across many different backgrounds, many different kinds of experiences in my life, from business to policy to academics, against somebody who spent her life as a career politician, who's essentially been Gavin Newsom's, again, from going from an intern for Gavin Newsom to somebody who would be entirely part of his team. My opponent actually said on video, and we've got a great web video at our website, chenforcalifornia.com, we call the collaborator. We call the video the collaborator because she basically admitted two things. Number one is she's very close friends with all the people who are in charge in Sacramento. And number two is she has no interest in holding them accountable. In fact, she actually said before issuing the results of an audit to the people of the state of California, she would talk to her friends in Sacramento and ask them first, is there anything we can do about this? Is there anything we can do about this audit before I let the people see the results of it? We don't need a collaborator as controller. We need a watchdog. And that's precisely why I believe this contrast we're drawing with my opponent is going to be very, very consequential. And the data shows in our private polling, the data shows, if we get the information out about my opponent, if we're able to get the information to people across California, we win this race. Not only do we win this race, we win this race convincingly, because people look at this and they say, you know what, we don't want this disaster as state controller. We want somebody who's got an actual record of accomplishment and somebody who's going to tell it like it is and be independent from the forces that be in Sacramento. So I have a great deal of confidence. Like I said, we just got to do our jobs. As a candidate, I'm trying as much as I can to get out all over the state, communicate message, raise money, do the things we need to do. And so tonight, let me conclude by saying I need your help. I need your help in a couple different ways. First of all, we've got to create a strong grassroots movement. We had a great movement in the primary that got us across the finish line, the only Republican to win statewide. But we need your help if we're going to do this again in November. That means telling your friends, telling your family, volunteering, getting involved. We've got a number of different ways for folks to do that. You can call from home. You can text friends of yours. You can get our lawn signs, which we'll have all over the state starting here in a couple weeks. We've got all sorts of different collateral for you to use to make the case about why this is an important office. And then once those ballots go out in October, I need all of you to get your friends to vote. We need a massive turnout if we're going to be successful. You know, Democrats for so many years have had all sorts of ways of making sure that they got the turnout they needed to be successful in these elections. Well, it's time for us to get out and make sure that not only are we telling our friends and family, but we're doing everything we can to get the word out across our cities and our communities and our counties and across this state. And so your efforts in that regard will be most helpful. I'm going to be all over the state. I'm going to be all the way up into Del Norte County, all the way south into Imperial and San Diego County. We're going to do everything we can to get the message out, but we can't do it without you. So I hope that we can count on your help. I hope that we can work together in partnership to get this across the finish line. I'm going to put in every ounce of work and every ounce of energy I have to making this happen. And I really do believe that when we come to the morning of November 9th, we're going to be celebrating the first Republican victory statewide in this state in 15 years. Can you believe it's been 15 years since we've won statewide, but no trend lasts forever. You know, I get a lot of people who are skeptical. I get a lot of media who say, you're never going to do it. Democrats win in this state statewide. That's what they do. You're going to lose. And I tell them, you don't understand the power that comes from people wanting change in the state. And we've already seen it in San Francisco, the recall of a DA, the recall of a school board, all of the energy behind the recall in LA of the DA there, which unfortunately didn't make the ballot, but you know, there's a lot of energy there. We have the ability to do this, but we've got to work together. We got to believe we can do it. And I believe we can. And with your help, I know we will. So thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. And looks like we've got some time to take questions.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lanhee, for what a great talk and a great explanation of who you are and what you're about. So appreciate that. We are going to do some questions right now. And before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that's here tonight that after Mr. Chen is done, he does have another engagement he has to get to right after this. So when he's done, please stay on for a few announcements from CFRW. So, okay, with questions, we got some really good ones too. So one of them is, what do you think will be the biggest challenge you will face as state controller?
Well, I'll tell you that the biggest challenge is just how mammoth our state budget is. I mean, you think about $300 billion of spending. I get the question all the time, where do you start? And the reality is we have to be systematic about how we go after this, right? We have to start with our biggest spending priorities and work down. And so I think the biggest challenge is going to be not only the mammoth size of our state budget and how much we've got to do to get this done, but also, you know, there's going to be a lot of people around Sacramento who don't want us to find out what the money's being spent on. I like to say that The reason why we don't have transparency for spending is in part because I don't think the politicians actually know how to solve problems. But when you go beyond that for a minute, I'm not sure the politicians actually want you to know. I'm not sure they actually want you to understand where the $300 billion goes. Now, why is that? Because then they have the power to send it where they want to send it. They have the power to reward their friends. And, there's been stories written about this. I'm not talking out of school. Gavin Newsom helps his campaign contributors. Everyone knows that. You make a contribution to Gavin Newsom's campaign, you're going to make sure, he's going to make sure that you're taken care of in some way. We all understand this dynamic that goes on in the state. All right. And so it's about time for somebody to stand up and say, listen, it's nothing personal. By the way, I'm out there to audit Republicans and Democrats in Sacramento. I don't really care. I want everybody to understand where the money is going. So the basic point is there are a lot of people in Sacramento, I think, who are not interested in transparency. I think that is going to be a big challenge. So both the size of the budget, how much work we've got to do, as well as, unfortunately, the entrenched interest. But let me tell you, I'm pretty tenacious when it comes to these things. And, I have no problem going before the people every single day and giving you an update on exactly where these things are. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to have a little audit meter. And we're going to be able to say where all the different audits are and how much we've completed. And if we run into a roadblock, I might come back and ask all of you for help when I'm controller and say, hey, listen, you know what? There's a politician that we're not getting along with, and he or she refuses to tell us the truth about what's going on. Can you help us with this? Because the public power, people power in this case, can be very, very important. So it's not a job without challenges. I understand that, but I feel very confidently that we'll be able to move the ball forward on making some good change.
What changes do you believe need to be made in the controller's office and in your in the whole department?
Well, I'll tell you, we need to change the leadership first.
Besides the guy at the top.
Yeah, it's so much of this starts, every organization I've been a part of, and I've run big organizations too. Every organization I've been a part of, the person at the top makes a huge difference. And, we've had controllers sometimes that have been caretakers. We've had controllers sometimes that have been focused on the more technocratic elements of things. We need a leader at the top of that department who's going to say, here is our North Star. Our North Star is serving the people of the state of California, plain and simple. Anything else really is secondary to that. So leadership makes a big difference. I don't know all of you know this. There are 1,400 people who work in the controller's office, 1,400 people. That's a lot of people. And many of them are auditors. And I've talked to a few of them. And you know what they say to me? We just want to do our jobs. A lot of these people feel like they've been hamstrung by the leadership in the department because, maybe they'll go down some road and they'll get told, don't really look at that. Let's look at something else. Here's the thing. We need to be clear about our priorities. We need people to understand that at the end of the day, our goal is to provide great service to the people of the state. And ultimately, we should solve problems again. All right. I say this a lot. We need to be in the problem solving business. And in too many situations, Sacramento is about the status quo. It's about go along to get along. It's about do whatever you need to do to pass the buck and blame somebody else. That culture has to change. And that, I think, is the biggest change we can bring to Sacramento, is a breath of fresh air, a change in culture. By the way, that's another thing the LA Times said. They said it's time for a fresh perspective. And they're right. And that's absolutely one of the biggest changes we got to make in order to make things work better in Sacramento.
Lanhee, how do you plan to address the fraud that occurs in distribution of funds from state programs?
Well, transparency. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for so many different things. And I really think that one of the things we've got to do, this is why I really believe so strongly in this creation of a transparency database, so that every single Californian can see the checkbook line by line. Where is the money going? What is it being spent on? Helping people understand in an easy to understand format what the state is spending money on, what the priorities are, how we address these challenges we have before us. Because here's the thing, if we don't know, if we're in the dark about what the state is spending money on, then we'll never be able to get to the bottom of any of these problems. And so that's why I think transparency is number one in terms of being able to fight fraud and fight abuse and fight mismanagement. Here's another example I just thought of that all of you might be interested to know. We have a big program in California that provides health care to tens of millions of Californians. It's called Medi-Cal. Big state program. It's actually run in partnership with the federal government. The number of people in Medi-Cal grew by 40% since 2014 when Obamacare was passed. Medi-Cal has not been audited since 2002. 20 years, the program hasn't been audited. Now, when they took a look, because at various points they go in and they do something called a spot audit, where they go in, and it's not a deep audit like the one I want to do that hasn't been done in 20 years. It's let's just go in and take a peek under the hood and see what's going on. The check engine light is on. Let's see what's happening. They found, get this, that there were tens of millions of dollars in benefits going to dead people. Literally, people who were deceased were the beneficiary of tens of millions of dollars in benefits. Imagine the good that money could have done. And I get it. I talk to people in Sacramento, they go, $80 million, that's just rounding error. That's pathetic. It's a pathetic excuse to say that's rounding error, because that's money that could be going to solve problems. And my basic point is, let's just figure it out, okay? Let's figure out where the money's going. Let's put it all on the table so people understand, hey, this is what the money's being used for. And then let's be clear. That is the best way we can fight all this fraud and waste and abuse and mismanagement. And believe me, that stuff is going on, all right? As much as our friends in Sacramento want to say there's not that much fraud, there's not that much waste, there is. There is. It's not all waste. I get that. But there's enough there that we should be concerned. You know that $20 billion I told you about earlier, that $20 billion in unemployment insurance fraud? I want you to stop for a minute and think about what $20 billion pays for. We would be able to hire 200,000 new police officers, 200,000 new police officers across our state with that money. We would be able to pay 2 whole years of gas taxes for every Californian. 2 years of gas taxes would be paid for by $20 billion. So it's not a small amount of money. I don't care what Gavin Newsom and the other people up there say when they say, oh, it's not that much money. It's a lot of money, and it's your money. So that's why you should be concerned.
Is there, in those situations, is there ever any way to go back after some of that money that was fraudulently received?
Yeah, so there actually was a task force that was formed after the unemployment insurance fraud. I actually met with the chief prosecutor, investigator, the attorney who's kind of in charge of that task force, a guy named McGregor Scott, who's up in Sacramento. Good man. He is looking to find the fraud where it sits. And when we can get that money back, we're trying to. But, Gretchen, it's a lot of money. And so far, I think they've only recovered a few $1 million, which is a lot of money, but it's a small percentage of the 20 billion that went out the door. So they're trying, but I'll tell you, they've tracked this money to crazy places. There's a case recently, a couple in Arkansas, the state of Arkansas, was getting unemployment insurance checks from California, and they used it to buy new cars and new furniture and even a new house. So, when this fraud is happening and when it is detected, we are going to do our best to prosecute it. But unfortunately, I will say this, the vast majority of it is gone. It's out the door. It's in Russia. It's in China. It's in places we're not seeing it again. And so that's disappointing. But the best thing we can do is to make sure this doesn't happen again. And you need a controller to hold these guys accountable, to say, listen, you're not doing your job. Fix the program once and for all.
Okay. Is there anything you will be able to do in your position to make sure that the bond money that was approved in the 2014 water management proposition will actually only go towards water management and storage services?
Yeah, there is, absolutely. So that's an area of state spending where we need a much heavier hand in terms of the oversight of where that money is going. And yeah, the controller, remember, any state flow of funds, the controller can audit, and the controller can figure out where that money is going. And water is one of the big policy travesties in our state. I mean, this is a state that is as innovative and naturally blessed as California. And we're told how long our showers need to be. We're told how long we can water our lawns. The fact that we haven't solved the water storage and conveyance problem yet, shame on these policymakers in Sacramento, shame on the governor, shame on everybody else for not being able to solve this. And all they keep saying is we need more money. We need more money. We need more money to solve the problem. And when we passed the water bond in 2014, the thought was we would finally have a proper amount of investment in storage and conveyance, which are big priorities. How do you get the water from where it is to where it's being consumed? How do we make sure our farmers and ranchers have enough of the water they need to produce for the breadbasket of the world? How do we do all those things? And if someone isn't keeping track of all the money, then we're going to be in for big trouble. So yes, the controller is going to have the ability to look into that money, to set up systems. And that's one of the things I'm a big believer in. We set up processes, we set up systems to make sure we have answers to these questions. Those are things the controller absolutely can do. And I plan on being vigilant when it comes to our water bond dollars as controller.
Okay, great. When you win, will you audit schools?
Oh boy, that is an area where we need to do some work. And yes, the controller can audit any local school district, because remember, local school districts all get state money. So we're going to be in there, every single school district across the state. Let me tell you a story that I heard recently from a school board member, actually in Northern California. They received a lot of money and assistance from the federal government during the pandemic. By the way, $63 billion came into California from the federal government for our schools. They said, oh, we're going to use it to improve filtration, because of COVID, and we're going to use it to get every kid an iPad and get some technology. Last time I checked, neither of those has been accomplished. And that $60 billion, there's no accountability for it. So what the school board member told me is literally this: the federal money was coming in and they had to use it by a certain date. And if they didn't use it, they were going to lose the money. So what do? They end up buying stuff and doing things that they don't actually need, as opposed to addressing the challenges that are really there. So we do have a big problem in our public schools. And I'll tell you something, a lot of these teachers unions, they don't actually represent the interests of the teachers who are members. The teachers who are members want better facilities. They want to make sure that these problems are being solved. The union bosses, they have a very different vision. They have a very different idea for what they want. And they want to control as much of this money as possible. They want to be in a position to dole it out. And then they, of course, use it and get involved in politics all the time. And that, unfortunately, is a cycle that our state has seen for far too long. And we need to break that cycle. And we break that cycle by providing accountability. So yes, we need to account for that $63 billion that went into our public schools. We need to account for every single dollar these districts are spending. And then ask the question, are our kids the ones who are being helped? Are our kids being helped? Are our teachers getting the things they need? Are parents having the right level and measure of involvement? Let me say this, not related to my race, but I'm so encouraged by how many of our fellow Californians are stepping up to run for school boards. It is a tremendously important task. And the leadership of the California Republican Party and so many other people that I know are investing time and energy in that process. And we need to bring change to these school boards, because in too many cases, these school boards are not doing their jobs across our state. And so, yes, we are going to get after what's going on in our public schools, and we're going to make it abundantly clear where all that money is actually going.
It's been widely reported that CalPERS lost money this last fiscal year. Can you speak a little bit more to the state's pension situation? And actually, I had this similar question from a couple people. So
yeah.
Can you speak to that? And can you tell us what you're going to be able to do to shore up that pension system?
Well, I'll tell you, you get me talking about pensions, we'll be here for the next 3 hours, but
I'm only going to give you 2 minutes, 1 minute.
Well,
no, 2 minutes.
Let me give you the what I consider the Cliff's Notes version of our challenge when it comes to pension, which is that we've been lied to for a long time about how much we actually owe in pension liabilities. People need to understand this. For decades, this state has been making promises to teachers, to state employees. And those are promises I think we need to keep. We need to keep them because legally we're obligated to, but because if you make promises, you probably ought to keep them. Well, what that means is if you want to keep these promises, you're talking about well over $1 trillion that taxpayers are going to be responsible for paying over the next several years. And we've been lied to in this sense. We don't actually know how much money is owed. Okay, we don't. Because for many, many years, what CalPERS has done is to basically create what's called a discount rate or a rate of return that is artificially low, and excuse me, it's artificially high. It's artificially high. And they create these assumptions because they want you to believe that you owe less money than you actually do. Okay. So basically, here's what they do is they say, okay, listen, we got a bunch of your money and we're investing it, and we think we're going to get 7% a year, or we're going to get 8% a year. And if you look at the real numbers, they don't hit those targets like half the time. Okay. So what they do is they inflate those targets because then it makes the liability seem smaller than it really is, right? And so if they're able to do that, then the beauty of it for them is they can say, and the unions can say, by the way, well, we don't owe that much money. It's not that big of a problem, but it really is a problem. Because if you don't hit those targets, the actual amount you're owing is a lot bigger than that. Okay, so what can the state controller do about this? Well, a few things. First of all, I've already told you that the state controller sits on the board of CalPERS and CalSTRS. What happens a lot of times is these boards are made up of people who just want the status quo. And whenever a reformer gets on these boards, they mysteriously get kicked off the board. All right. The controller can't get kicked off the board. The controller is put on the board by virtue of the people of the state of California. And so we're going to be able to go and actually push for changes like, how about a realistic accounting of how much we owe? How about we actually target the rate of return to what the actual rate of return is? Let's look back over the last 30 years. What's been your rate of return? Well, that's the assumption we should use. We shouldn't use some fanciful number that we pull out of thin air because we think it looks good. So CalPERS and CalSTRS have to be realistic. And that's the place where I would start. It comes back to fiscal responsibility. It's an important concept, but it's not one we see enough of, frankly, in Washington. I mean, you saw today President Biden talk about forgiving student loan debt.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so you want to forgive the obligations that were taken on by people because, you know, maybe I don't feel like paying it anymore. And by the way, what about those kids who don't go to college? What about the families of kids who don't go to college? Now they're going to assume responsibility and liability for people who made decisions that maybe were decisions that they couldn't fulfill, that they couldn't pay. I mean, so this attitude of fiscal irresponsibility extends well beyond California. But we need to start by reminding people that fiscal responsibility is important. And it's important because ultimately it's the only way that we're honest with people about how much we're going to have to pay. Because guess what? Taxes are going to go up to pay for those liabilities. No one's told you that yet, but they will. They're going to go up at some point, and then the politicians are going to say, we had to do it. We had no choice. And the reality is, if you solve the problem, if you deal with the problem today, you're going to have less of a problem down the road. Remember that $97.5 billion surplus that we had in the state? Why don't you use some of that to pay down our liabilities? Why don't you use some of that to actually build roads instead of raising the gas tax all the time? The lack of fiscal responsibility is an outrage. It's an outrage to me, and we need to fix it. And the only way we fix it, again, is by transparency. So I'll get off my soapbox. My basic point is on CalPERS and CalSTRS, a lot of problems we need to address.
So speaking of outrage, are you going to be able to do anything about the crazy train or any of the other ridiculous projects that the state has assumed?
So high-speed rail, which is an interesting concept because there's no train, there's no track. And in order to complete the project they want, it's going to cost 10 times more than what they first estimated. All right. I want people to understand it's a $10 billion project that's become a $100 billion project to build 119 miles, not the 400 miles we need, 119 miles for $100 billion. That's the project they're trying to build. And by the way, they want another $40 billion to build a track between San Francisco and San Jose. Now, never mind linking the track that ends in San Jose with the track that ends in the Central Valley. How much is that going to cost? So yes, we need to audit the High-Speed Rail Authority because we know there's some fishy stuff going on there. The LA Times reported last year that the high-speed rail was sending money to contractors in Germany and other places, not even American companies, sending contracts to other countries to contractors that had not even fulfilled their prior obligations. You had contractors that were promising to finish this, that, or the other, whatever it is, and they didn't finish it. But instead of blowing the whistle and saying, hey, you know what, maybe we should put a pause on this project, they said, no, that's fine. Let's send them more money. And the High-Speed Rail Authority keeps going on and on and on and on. Some of the biggest proponents of the status quo sit over there at that High-Speed Rail Authority. So we need to figure it out. And yes, they will get audited. We are going to go in there. We're going to see, hey, we're going to say, hey, listen, open your books. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to know, what are you spending money on? And let the people know. And by the way, you all can decide. All right. I'm the controller can't like go and stop the spending. All right. The controller can say to all of you, listen, this is where the money is going. You think it's a good idea? And if you don't, it's up to you all. It's up to us as voters to make change in this state. And that's really what this is about. It's about creating the conditions for change. And I really do believe it's so important for us. It's so important for us to provide information, because nobody trusts the high-speed rail is actually working. Nobody trusts that this is actually going to where it's supposed to be going. So yeah, let's get in there. Let's figure it out.
We have just time for a couple more questions. Are you okay on your time on your end?
Yeah, it looks like we got about 5 more minutes. So I think we're
okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the questions we got is, who are you going to take with you as your team? Is that something you can talk about?
Well, I haven't. I don't like putting the cart ahead of the horse. So, right now, the only team I'm worried about is a team we got to put together to win this in November. But I'm confident we're going to have a great team. I talked to lots of people, lots of young people, lots of people who are actually at the end of their careers, who all want to help. They all say the same thing. It's like, will you help? Will you provide us an opportunity to get into government and help you solve these problems? And I say, absolutely. We're going to bring the best talent in. I really believe that, because you know why good talent doesn't go to Sacramento right now? It doesn't go to Sacramento because nobody wants to sit there and do nothing. All right. Nobody wants to sit there and feed a status quo that's broken. The people I talk to, they want to go in and fix problems. And we're going to have problem solvers. We're going to have people from the private sector, from the public sector, from schools who want to fix the problem. So I have the ability to bring in a team with me. It's not everybody, obviously. We're going to bring in a strong team. I've built strong teams in my career in academics and business and in policy. I have great confidence that we're going to build a terrific team that's going to go in and address these challenges, because we can't do it alone. It was the same message I conveyed earlier. I'm not foolish enough to think I can solve this on my own. I just think that we got to provide the right leadership and get the right people in there. And then I think some of these problems we'll begin to solve them, because good people want to contribute their time and energy to solving these issues. And I think we can get them solved.
Okay. How can we convince Democrats and independents? What can we do to help convince them to vote for you? What's your advice in that?
Yeah, I'd encourage you. I'd encourage all of you to look at that LA Times editorial. Remember, it's written by real progressives, right? And even they were convinced, because here's the basic argument. Do you like how the money is being spent? Do you think that we're getting everything we can for every dollar we spend? And even Democrats who might disagree with many of us about those exact priorities will say, you know what? I don't like what I see. I mean, how can you? You look out on the streets of LA or San Francisco or Fresno or any other major city in California, even the suburbs, homelessness, crime, general lawlessness, a lack of civility in our politics. How can anybody like what's going on? And so the case I make is, listen, if you think everything is proceeding exactly according to plan in California, you think everything's great, I'm probably not your guy. I'm probably not going to be your guy, because you're going to go with somebody who's going to continue the status quo. But if you really think that we need something different in this state, and it's time for change in the sense of getting accountability so we can finally spend this money smarter. If you want to watch, remember, this is really important saying, because, politics all boils down to a couple words sometimes, right? Watchdog, not lapdog. If you want a watchdog in Sacramento who will actually stick up for you as opposed to what the politicians want, or a lapdog for the special interests and everything else up there, the choice is very clear. Okay. So I just say to people, I get it. There are a lot fewer Republicans and Democrats. We haven't elected someone in a long time. I hear it all the time. But if you really want accountability, you need independence. And I am the only candidate in this race that can provide independence. I mean, my opponent said it herself. She's going to be a buddy with everybody who she's going to try and audit. How do you do that? How do you do that? Is the IRS your buddy? No, they're not. They're going to come in and audit you. They're going to come in and audit you. Now, apparently there's 90,000 more of them to do it. But if you put that aside for a minute, what we have is a serious problem in our state, which is a lack of independence in a very important role. And so we need someone who's going to tell the story like it is and get people the actual story. And that's why I think even independents and Democrats are going to want a controller like me.
My clock shows that we're at the time you said you needed to end,
Yep.
and I've got a couple more questions, but I don't want to hold you over. So I just want to say thank you so much
Thank you.
for what an informative evening this has been. I'm seeing some of the comments that people are asking for recordings of this and how they can share this and all of. So thank you so much. Can you please just give your website again?
Sure. Yeah. Go to Chen for California, CHENFOR, California.com. Lots of ways you can help, lots more information you can get your friends. We're going to have lots of yard signs. Make sure to grab one from your local Republican office when they go out. They'll be out in probably in early to mid-September. We'll get them out. Make sure to grab one. Throw one up in your lawn, throw one up in an intersection. Tell your friends, we need your help to get this done. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Learned so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Lanhee
evening.
Chen. Thank you. You too. Janet, you're up. You have to unmute. Unmute.
Yes, I had to see the little square first. That was a fascinating time. Wow.
I know, I'm sort of mind boggled.
I am too. He gave us so much information, and he's so energetic and he's so positive. That's what we need in our candidates. Those are kind that it's a joy to get behind and just support them. So boy, do we need him. I was going, please let this be a dream come true. So it was just great, and I'm really grateful for him and grateful for all of you for this evening. We have other things coming up, people, and we're really so glad that you're here. I hope you enjoyed the evening as much as we did. There is another distinguished speaker that is coming up, and Gretchen, would you like to talk about the sheriff?
Yes,
That's a good thing.
on September 29th, Sheriff Richard Mark will be joining us. He has worked extensively with the people that put together the 2000 Mules movie with Dinesh D'Souza, and
right?
The sheriff is working on a program to go around the country talking to sheriff department to make sure that they are all aware of their constitutional rights and constitutional responsibilities as sheriffs to do everything they can to ensure safe and fair elections. There are a lot of things that, a lot of us didn't know were fall under the purview of the county sheriffs. So, the Sheriff Richard Mack will be here with us on September 29th. It will be a Zoom. We hope you will all join us. That will be part of our Distinguished Speaker Series. So and we will have some more candidates coming up before then as well. And those will be announced as soon as they are pinned down. So that's what I have on Sheriff Richard Mack.
Wow, that's wonderful. Nancy, did you have anything that you want to let everybody know that might be happening in your area of political activities that we haven't covered before? Because we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ballot harvesting and also manning the election polls at night, having your tailgate party kind of a thing going just to watch the drop boxes.
We talked about that last night. For those who weren't here, can you tell them about those tailgating parties? That sounded like so much fun.
Well, I saw another group that was doing, I think they were in Arizona, and they would tailgate. They would get together with some friends, and they would go out and they would sit at these drop boxes, and they'd drop the tail of the truck and just, kind of have a party out there watching and they said a lot of people just walked the other way when they, they saw that we were being watched so well. So yeah, and again, we're going to have more candidate series along with the training. I have a lot of different candidates in mind, and those will come out pretty soon. And please, everyone, you got to get involved in helping to win a few for the Gipper here in California. Donate, make calls, walk doors, adopt a candidate, do whatever you can, because we all need to be busy at this time because we have a lot to lose. Thank you. And Janet.
Well, we were also wanting everybody to know about our upcoming fall Board of Directors and conference, which will be in Burlingame. And for those of you who don't know where Burlingame is, it's very close to the San Francisco airport. And it will be at the DoubleTree by Hilton, October 14th and 15th. We have a lot of great speakers are going to be there. We've got a fun Friday night event, couple of them that will be a fun fundraising event. We've got workshops, and we just encourage all of you to come. It's wonderful to have Zooms. It really is. We're very, very grateful for that, especially the last 2 years. But it's so important that we get together. There's an energy we all have, and we are going to energize each other and enthuse each other and get us out there to the polls, because that will make the difference in this state. We've got to have Republican turnouts by the millions. So we want you all there at the conference, and then we're going to pump up the volume to get out there in November. Do you want to talk about the speakers, Gretchen, that we have?
Sure,
here?
sure. I'll give you a quick rundown of the list. We have Senator Brian Dahle, who is our candidate for governor, will be speaking at the Saturday night dinner. We have Harmeet Dillon, will be speaking to us Saturday. We have Tom Del Baccaro will be joining us on Friday evening at our fundraiser. And part of that will involve an auction where he is the prize. And if you win him, he will come to your home and cook a great gourmet Italian dinner. And he is a real prize. So that's worth betting on.
That's worth the ticket a Friday night.
That's just, even if you don't win, it's just worth it.
Yeah.
We have a law professor from Berkeley, John Yu will be with us speaking. We have Ray Chernenke, a former past NFRW president, will be with us. Doug LaMalfa will be speaking to us. We have a woman named Tamara Farah, who is the CEO of Empower Moms. And that's an organization that works with parents, not just moms, but parents, and teaching them and helping them take back power in their schools. We will have Joshua Phillips from the Epoch Times in person with us. And, oh no, I'm sorry, he's a Zoom, but he will be with us. And we have Saturday night, in addition to Senator Brian Dahle, we have a special secret surprise guest
super
speaker.
Super secret. But anybody who comes will not be disappointed.
Right.
We're not over promising here.
No,
this is going to be a great guest, and you all will love that evening.
Yeah.
And of course, that we're going to have great dinners and as I said, workshops. And the DoubleTree is easily accessed by a shuttle from the airport, and it's only $5. For those of you who are driving there, the parking, I believe, is half price. Is that right, Gretchen? From
Yes,
what
half price parking for our members.
There will be free breakfasts that they're throwing in. It's going to be a great conference. So please, everybody come. Now, don't forget, don't miss a deadline. All right. The deadline to register early is coming up there. You can see that in our call to conference, and that's on the web, right, Sharon?
Yes.
All accessed right there. And to also get your hotel reserved early. The key is early. It's a very important word. Get in there first. And that is so important.
You have till September 3rd for the early bird registration for the conference.
Right.
September 4th, it goes up. So get in and register now and get the early bird pricing.
Mhm.
And you have until October 1st to register, period. If you haven't registered by October 1st, that's our deadline.
Right.
And we are a limited block of rooms. So you do want to call the DoubleTree and get your room blocks, or go on the website
Fine, yeah.
and register through that for
Mhm.
our block of rooms. And they've given us a really good price on the rooms too. So don't
Great.
wait.
Great evening. And I want to thank Elena and Sherry for having this evening at all because of you guys. It's all supported and created by you. And I want to thank Nancy and Gretchen and everybody who is attending tonight. This is exciting how we can now support our Republican candidates. Please, when we have these Zoom meetings, invite friends. Doesn't all have to be CFRW members. We're opening this up because we want each one to teach one. We want to spread this good news and we want to turn this state red. All right. So thank you all. Is there anybody saying anything else? And we'll just end the evening.
I
All
think we're
right.
done.
It's been a great evening. Thank you all. All right. See you at the
Yeah.
next one.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.